Coming up, I'll be joined by actor Nick Searcy, who talks about his role in Vindicating Trump, and he also talks about Trump more generally. Debbie is going to come on today. We're going to talk about how the Biden-Harris regime has permitted dangerous criminals to cross the border and endanger the lives of U.S. citizens, and also why pro-lifers who refuse to vote for Trump are actually making sure their cause is completely defeated. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
The film Vindicating Trump still in theaters, not quite as many theaters as it was last weekend, but it's still out there. And if you haven't seen it and would like to see it in the theater, you should do it. Do it this week or do it this coming weekend. The website to get tickets, vindicatingtrump.com. We're also just about a week or so away from the new book being out. I'm holding it in my hand. It's right here. Looks cool. Vindicating Trump. And the book is a elaboration of the argument. Goes further than the movie. In fact, books have the space to be able to do that. And it considers arguments, lays it out systematically. A movie is more of a narrative. And the book has references, and it's a theme in the book, and in fact in the movie, that I want to discuss here today, and that is the charge that Trump is some sort of a dictator. Now, many of us attempted to dismiss this charge and go, that's ridiculous. Trump didn't do anything dictatorial in his term in office. And how many leading Democrats did he prosecute and lock up? Answer, 0. Did he even direct the police agencies of the government? No, it seems like they were going after him even in his own term in office. So all of this appears to be highly strange and dumb. But think about it. If it is so dumb, why does the left keep using that accusation? Why that one? And why at Trump? The left didn't accuse George W. Bush of being a dictator, or McCain, or George H.W. Bush, or even Reagan. They would say other things about those guys, like George H.W. Bush is really out of it, or Reagan is a washed-up movie actor. But they didn't use this particular charge. It's the particularity of it that demands some explanation. And what I want to do today is to consider the two items of evidence that are most frequently given for Trump being a dictator and look at them a little more closely. The first one is where Trump was asked about being a dictator, and he said half-jokingly, yeah, if elected, I'm not going to be a dictator. He said, well, maybe for one day. That was Trump. And obviously, Trump is being Trump. He's whimsical. He jokes. He does things like that. He trolls the other side. He knows that he can say things that will get to them, get under their skin, annoy them. By the way, he does this in other areas too. Hey, Trump, Trump is never going to leave office. And then Trump puts out memes, Trump 24, Trump 28, Trump 32, Trump 36. Now, obviously, think of how the obvious humor is in the fact that Trump isn't going to be around in 36 or in 40 or in 42. So the memes have a certain fanciful quality to them. That's the first point. But even if Trump is half joking, the point is, well, maybe the other half part of him isn't joking. Well, here is the other exhibit, and this exhibit has actually been put out by Kamala Harris herself. Trump did write the following on Truth Social. Do you know that the presidential election results of 2020, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out in all caps, and declare the all caps rightful winner, or do you have a new election? And then Trump says something rather startling, even to those of us who are supporters of Trump. He says this: a massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. So what is Trump saying here? He appears to be saying that there are times when even the Constitution needs to be set aside. And this has caused many people to go, aha, look over here. Anybody who would set aside the Constitution for any reason is a kind of a dictator. Now, what's really interesting is that this exact same charge was made against Abraham Lincoln. It was made against Abraham Lincoln not when he was being campaigning, not even right after he was elected. It was when Lincoln suspended habeas corpus at the outbreak of the Civil War. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, which is a basic right in the Constitution. It's essentially a due process of law type of right. And the Constitution is actually quite clear. The Constitution gives Congress the power in a national emergency to suspend habeas corpus. It does not give that power to the president. And yet, Lincoln, without the support of Congress, went ahead and exercised that right. Now, what was Lincoln's defense or justification for doing this? Basically, here's what Lincoln says. He makes a sort of a constitutional point, and he says, yes, it's true. Congress has the power to suspend habeas corpus. He goes, in order for Congress to suspend habeas corpus, Congress has to be able to formally meet and make that kind of a decision. He goes, but guess what? The country is in a civil war. And so the Confederates are very strong in Virginia. In fact, that is their stronghold. Lee's army is called the Army of Northern Virginia, and Congress cannot safely meet. So how can Congress exercise a right that Congress is not even in a position to convene to deliberate upon? So Lincoln, in effect, is saying that he is doing it on Congress's behalf, and when Congress later meets, they will, in fact, ratify what he has done. And of course, that actually happened. Congress met later. They ratified what Lincoln had done. So Lincoln said, I'm not acting unconstitutionally, even though I would have to say a case can be made that he was. But in giving his defense of his action, Lincoln says something himself just as startling as Trump, in fact, maybe more so. He says this: are all the laws but one to go unexecuted, and the government itself go to pieces, lest that one be violated? What Lincoln is basically saying is we are in a kind of a precarious ship of state. The ship of state is faces the risk of being destroyed and going under the sea. Lincoln is saying that if that happens, all our rights will be jeopardized. So in effect, Lincoln is saying, are you expecting me to protect this one right, habeas corpus, and in doing so, to jeopardize the whole ship, which is in a sense the guarantor of all our rights? I mean, what Lincoln's saying here is very striking. He's saying basically that, look, I didn't violate the Constitution, but guess what? If I did, I would have been justified in doing so. Why? Because the national existence itself is at stake. In other words, what Lincoln is saying is that the Constitution exists for the people and not the other way around. It makes no sense to cling to habeas corpus, watch the whole country go under the ocean, in which case no rights, including habeas corpus, could be protected. So I agree with Lincoln here. And it's in this context that I understand what Trump is trying to say. What Trump is trying to say is, look, how do we even have a constitutional democracy? We have it because we have free and fair elections. That is the mechanism by which we decide who should be at the helm of this so-called ship of state. Now, if there's sufficient systematic cheating going on, that process of even deciding who's going to pilot the ship is being jeopardized, and jeopardized not just once, but jeopardized now and for the future, Lincoln's point is, you have to stop that. The very Constitution, the very ship of state, depends upon having a clean, transparent, and fair and free process. If that's not happening, then we have to make sure it happens first. And even the Constitution is not secure while that is allowed to go on. So, what I've tried to do here today is to take the single most Exhibit A, that Trump has a disregard for constitutional law, that he's somehow playing fast and loose with the Constitution. And I've tried to show that Trump is not the first person to be accused of this. Lincoln was too. And in Trump's case, as in Lincoln's, they're talking about something that threatens the ship of state. In Lincoln's case, of course, it's the Civil War itself. In Trump's case, it is the It is the existence of systematic election fraud. Now, of course, you can factually disagree with Trump. Well, I don't agree there was enough fraud. But my point is that if you accept Trump's premise that there was, in fact, sufficient systematic fraud to tip the 2020 election, in that context, what Trump is saying is very much in the Lincoln tradition, and moreover, makes a kind of sense. What it comes down to, and we, by the way, use the same rule in our ordinary life. We have all kinds of laws and principles and things and codes of conduct. But think of it this way. If suddenly your life and the life of your family was gravely threatened, what rules would you follow to protect yourself and your family in that situation? Answer. You would be willing to throw all the rules out the window. Why? Because your very existence is at stake. And if you jeopardize that, what's the point of all the principles and codes that you want to live by? So, in other words, the very right of survival gives you the unquestioned ability and right to do whatever you can to save yourself in that situation. And this is exactly the principle of survival that Lincoln appealed to, and it's exactly the same principle that Trump is appealing to. I'm happy to say I've got a new sponsor for the podcast. It's Here.com. I'd love for you to check them out. If you've been frustrated with hearing loss, Here.com is exactly where you need to go. Did you know that untreated hearing loss can lead to social isolation, depression, even cognitive decline? That's why it's so important to take action early. That's why Here.com comes in. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, a 4.9 rating at Consumer Affairs, over 1,200 audiologists across the U.S. that recommend these devices over any other on the market. Over 500,000 people already love these tiny but powerful hearing aids. They started Here.com with a simple mission: make world-class hearing aids easily accessible for everyone, no matter what their lifestyle or their budget. After years of research and development alongside top German engineers, they're proud to unveil their most innovative device yet, Horizon by Here.com. Go to Here.com/Dinesh, get your 45-day no-risk trial, plus a free hearing consultation. Again, that's Here.com/Dinesh. With the massive tax hikes proposed by Kamala Harris, an almost 40% top income tax rate, 7% increase to the corporate tax, a capital gains tax on unrealized gains, these proposals could add almost $2 trillion to a current $2 trillion deficit. You might be thinking it's time to make more of your savings tax sheltered and inflation sheltered. Well, this is where the people at Birch Gold Group can help you. Birch Gold Group will assist you in converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And here's the best news. You don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just text the word Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold. No obligation, just information on how to fortify your savings before the crazy really hits. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers like me and Debbie. You should contact Birch Gold too. How do you do it? Text Dinesh to the number 989898. You'll get your free information kit on gold today. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome back to the podcast the one and only Nick Searcy. He needs no introduction. I'm not going to do a standard introduction because you know him as the award-winning actor and director. He has starred in dozens of movies and TV series. And of course, his greatest role, he may not be willing to admit this, is in the new film Vindicating Trump. You can follow him on X at YesNickSearcy. Nick, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. Vindicating Trump is now out in theaters. You play as you did in Police State. You play kind of the bad guy. You're the head of the intelligence apparatus, and we have these kind of war rooms in the movie. We have a media war room. We have kind of a DNC war room, but we also have a intelligence apparatus war room. And I wanted first maybe to ask you, because there might be some people who watch movies who go, well, if you're doing a documentary, why do you do these imaginative recreations? Like what role do they play in a movie like this? And what would you say to such a person?
Well, I think, thanks for having me, Dinesh. I mean, I think a lot of people think that there's things going on behind the scenes. They look at what's happening. and they say, how could all this be coordinated? It can't just be springing up on its own naturally to have all this lawfare going on, one lawsuit brought in New York City, one in Florida, one in Georgia, one in D.C. All of this has to be in some way coordinated. And so, when you are dealing with criminals like this in the government, of course, they're good at hiding who they are. Criminals are often good at covering up their crimes. So I think the reenactment is important because it gives you a glimpse of how this could be happening and what is probably going on behind the scenes.
And it seems like one of the things the recreations show you is that the coordination is something in between a conspiracy on the one hand, in other words, direct coordination, but on the other hand, it's people who have similar vested interests who recognize that they can move in tandem with each other, even without outright conspiracy.
Right. I mean, it's like that scene where we talk about the lawsuit in New York City with the porn star, and we're talking about it, and goes, do you think that's going to hold any weight? No. Well, not in the middle of the country, it wouldn't. But in Manhattan, everybody's on our side anyway. So I think that's sort of coordination. It doesn't even have to be spoken. It's like, that's why they try all the January 6th defendants in D.C., because they know that the jury pool there and the prosecutors and the judges are all on their side anyway.
I got to ask you a question that I don't know the answer to, and I'm actually curious. I typically see the scripts of these recreations up front, and then I'm off doing interviews and doing another part of the film. So I actually wasn't there. I was there the day of the recreations, but I was doing the interview with the guys about the ballot making. My question is this: do you find that when you get these scripts, you deliver them as is, or are you kind of an improviser? Because when I see the final product, it seems to suit your personality so well that I said to Debbie, I go, I bet you Nick's the one who came up with some of these lines. And she goes, oh yeah, probably.
Well, yeah, Bruce and Nathan, they definitely encouraged me to sort of, try different things. And I tend to do that anyway. I think it gives the, whatever character I'm playing, it kind of tailors it more towards my personality, my way of delivering a line or whatever. And it gives it a certain, verisimilitude or reality or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I'm definitely an improviser. I definitely go off script quite a bit.
You were telling me on set, this might have been at Police State, but nevertheless, you were saying something like, it is kind of funny that I play the bad guy fairly frequently when my wife, your wife, says, hey, Nick, you're actually a teddy bear. So is this a case where, I guess this is what they call acting?
Yeah. Well, I got my career started in Fried Green Tomatoes, and I was a terrible bad guy then. I sort of got more bad guys after that because that's how people saw me. And so it has been fun, I've got to say. It's fun playing the bad guy in a film because you're not actually hurting anybody, and you're not actually going to suffer the consequences of doing these horrible things. So it's kind of delicious, I can be as horrible as I want to be, and I can get away with it, and nobody gets hurt.
I was, Debbie's laughing in the background, but I remember something that the actor Lee Van Cleef once said. This is the great Western actor, and of course he did other roles as well. He was making the comment that one way to be a really effective bad guy is to let the audience in on the mind of the bad guy, which is not entirely bad. In other words, the bad guy too has a motivation. The bad guy too is out to do something or achieve something, and very often the bad act is sometimes a regrettable way to get to that result. What do you think of that analysis of bad guy psychology?
I think it's pretty close to the way I look at it, which is bad guys don't think they're bad. They think they're doing the right thing. It's like they think that all these people have to be killed in order to achieve an objective. And they think that the greater good will be served. And I think probably even in Vindicating Trump, the guy that I'm playing, he doesn't think of himself as being a criminal or a bad guy. He thinks of himself as trying to save democracy, like they always try to say. But yeah, bad guys don't think they're bad. And it's important as an actor, if you're playing a bad guy, don't judge him. remember, he thinks that he's doing the right thing.
Nick, let's talk about the state of the country. I had a thought that came by my mind this morning, and I was thinking to myself, I'm suddenly feeling like a little bit of a disappointment at the era in which we live in. In other words, and I say this because, when someone says that, normally it means like, oh, I'm having financial problems or I got family problems. And for me, it's the actual opposite. I'm in good health. My family life is great. I'm doing well. But I feel like there's something that is screwy with the third decade of the 21st century. And I would normally say it's only in America, but I actually see the signs of it, and I'm sure you do too, all around the world. And so that's my question to you is, do you have this surreal feeling a little bit that like the world is going a little mad around us and people are being drawn into it?
Yeah, I certainly feel that. It feels like the world is going insane. There's so many crazy things that like 20 years ago, you would this is not even a discussion, having men play women's sports or, the whole COVID experience, how quickly everybody just sort of like complied with everything, even when the rules seemed ridiculous and arbitrary and silly and counterproductive. And I really do feel like a lot of times, especially when I was living in California, I felt like I was surrounded by zombies, by crazy people that were like just really going along with the insanity. And I think part of that is because of the march through the institutions that the communists have done over the last few decades. And it's like they've really poisoned the minds of a lot of people. And I think I was reading something the other day that the left doesn't tell lies just to make you believe the lies. They also tell them to make you just not know what to believe, that there is no such thing as truth. And that's what I think we're living through right now.
Thinking about the COVID experience, do you think that the reason we all know people who are acting just robotically, and some of those people are acting robotically now. I mean, you go to the airports and you see there's going to be it's a minority, but it's a noticeable minority, and these are people who to this day will wear masks outdoors. Now, if someone is at the airport and they've got some chronic condition or asthma or they've got cancer and they're wearing a mask, I totally understand. So I'm not saying this is true of every case. What I want to ask is, do you think that people become robots like that because A, they have this complete trust in the authorities and the people with the white coats? If a doctor says it, they believe it. How can it not be true? Or do you think that they are kind of weak, sniveling creatures who are obedient to authority and a little scared of authority, and all they need is someone to say, do it, and they will do it? I mean, you know that if you have a crowd and someone in authority shows up and says, all of you go stand right over there in a loud, authoritative voice, pretty much everyone will do it. The crowds are almost programmed to take orders of that sort. What's going on? How do you read the psychology of people who behave like this?
I think that really it becomes the sinister nature of the lies that they're being fed. And the monolithic media that all says the same thing over and over again, part of those lies, they are designed to make the person feel superior if they believe them. So it's like, if you believe that Trump is a Nazi, you're a good person. And if you don't believe it, then you're bad. And if you are going to take the vaccine and all 6 of the boosters, then that means you're a good person, because bad people don't do it. And I think that is really the thing that hits me, is like the people that believe those lies feel superior to people that don't believe them. And that is built into the design of what they're being fed.
I mean, that's very interesting. You're saying that there is a kind of a moral payoff, which is that these are people who are self-righteous, and the left is giving them a way to exercise that self-righteousness, really by looking down on their fellow citizens.
Right. And I think godlessness has something to do with that. I mean, so much on the left is like they don't believe in a higher power. They're very material. This world is all there is. So they have to get their morality from everybody telling them what a good person they are. They don't get it from anywhere else. And so that I think that's the sinister nature of how the media has operated and how so many of us have been brainwashed.
What do you think, Nick, as you look at Trump and you look at Kamala? Debbie and I were talking about this on the way to the podcast today. And Debbie goes, do you think, we're not sure what the outcome of the election was. Debbie and I have a small bet going. I think Trump's going to win. She's afraid. She wants him to win, obviously, but she's afraid that the Democrats will pull it off with a combination of propaganda and cheating. But we both agree that she will probably win the popular vote. And then the moment we both said that, we stepped back to think, well, what does that say about the country? I mean, what does this say that a dingbat, an empty vessel, a complete freak, can win? I mean, in advance, the majority of citizens and maybe a few non-citizens of this country. Do you agree that Kamala will win the popular vote? And what do you think it says about the state of the nation?
I don't think she'll win the popular vote legitimately. I do think that a majority of this country sees through her and really is behind Trump. I think that the polls are designed to keep it close enough so that when they pull their shenanigans and do whatever they do, it's believable because you can say all the way up to it, oh, they were so close, but I don't think it's close. I do think there's a danger of them getting away with it because, as you know, they only have to steal it in a few counties. They don't have to steal it everywhere. But it goes back to what you were saying about you're surrounded by madness. I mean, in a sane world, no one would be voting for Kamala Harris. I mean, 15%, maybe 20%, because she's absolutely unqualified. She can't even string a sentence together that makes any sense. And the idea that she's going to be fixing an economy that she's been part of the administration creating it for the last 3.5 years, and that she's going to be able to stand up to Putin and all these foreign leaders is just ridiculous on its face. And it really shows you what an insane world we're living in, that it's even close.
Yeah, I mean, she says, I will create jobs, I will do this, I will do that. It's almost like if you were to ask her, all right, Kamala Harris, tell us how you would create a single job. Just one. Forget about thousands or millions of jobs. How would you create one job? Tell us how you would do it. I don't think she would know what to say.
She created that job that she had at McDonald's. That's about the only job.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. Well, Nick, thank you very much for joining me. This has been delightful. I've been talking to actor and producer and director Nick Searcy. Follow him on X at Yes Nick Searcy. Nick, was a pleasure to work with you both in Police State and Vindicating Trump. And thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me in both films, Dinesh. It's an honor to be able to use my craft to strike a blow for the country, and I really appreciate being part of it.
Once again, MyPillow has been canceled by another box store. How crazy is that? So they are passing an incredible offer exclusively to my viewers and listeners. The standard MyPillow, it retails for $49.98, and for a limited time, you can have one for just $14.98. Wow. Don't miss out on this amazing deal while supplies last. Order now using promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. That's the number, 800-876-0227. But that's not all. Deals all around. You can get a 4-piece MyPillow towel set, just $25. A brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98. The famous MyPillow bed sheets as low as $25. And there's so much more. To get these discounts on all the MyPillow products, including the standard size MyPillow, just $14.98. Limited, by the way, to 10 per order. Go to mypillow.com. Don't forget to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Well, introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. Forget about paying those excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it. From routine checkups to unexpected emergencies, with Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. Debbie and I normally do our roundups on Friday, but we decided to do a couple of segments today, Wednesday. Friday, I plan to do a special edition of the podcast focusing on mine, but also ours as a family, up close and personal experience of Trump, because I think that there's a dimension of Trump that he holds back from exposing to the general public. It may be just the way he's raised. He has kind of a manly resistance to talking about feelings or vulnerability. I want to bring out, just through experience, what Trump is like up close. So that'll be Friday. We have been planning to talk now for a couple of days. This came out a little earlier, over the weekend, in fact. Some startling numbers, not just on people who have come into this country illegally, but criminals who have been released into the country with knowledge of their criminal past and their criminal history. You have the data, and I think the numbers are just so startling that it's worth just slowly delivering the data first so we can let it sink in.
Well, first I want to say that Trump himself said this. He said, remember, Maduro let all the criminals in Venezuela come to the United States. Everybody looked at him like he was nuts, right? Well, this ICE report came out, and I think that they didn't really want to have it come out right now of all times, because they want to pretend like the Harris-Biden administration, well, you know what I mean, the Biden-Harris administration, like they actually cared about the border crossings when they did not.
Well, it may be that the government doesn't want this stuff out, but the Border Patrol does. Because let's remember, the Border Patrol has been simmering under essentially a non-enforcement job, where the government is saying, don't do your job. Don't enforce the law. Release these people into the country. You are a border, not a border patrol, but like a border lack of patrol. If you know what I mean. It's kind of like telling the cops, catch and release.
Absolutely.
Right? And,
or don't even catch.
Or don't even catch in the first place. All right, so let's go to some of these numbers.
Yeah, so 13,000, a little over 13,000 murderers.
Wait, so think about this.
13,000.
There would be, in any other time, in a more rational time maybe, there would be outrage if it came out that the Biden administration released 10 known murderers into the population. We are talking about 13,000 murderers.
That we know of.
Okay. By the way, there are a couple of important qualifications that Bill Milligan of Fox News has put out, which we will get to. But let's just digest these numbers. 13,000 murderers. Who else?
15,000, almost 16,000 rapists.
Wow.
Rapists. 425,431 convicted criminals.
So these are dizzying numbers, right? I mean, in other words, think of it this way. I think that if just these numbers were digested by every American, it would be impossible for Harris and Biden to win, for Harris to win this election.
It would be impossible to vote for any Democrat.
Right.
Period.
Because
End of story.
The numbers are like downright insanity. And think about it. The left is, they spent so much time trying to hang the convicted felon label around Trump, in the belief, correct as it turns out, that if people believe that this guy is a criminal, a convicted felon, they would not vote for him. And yet, these guys are letting in droves, and they're knowingly doing it. This is the telling point. Now, we'll discuss the implications of it, but let's look at a couple of important qualifications. First of all, I'm just going to read a couple of things from Bill Milligan. One is he says, not every single one of these guys are technically illegal aliens. Some of them are non-citizens who are here on visas who end up committing a crime. It's a noticeable distinction, but not that big a deal. The point is, we're still talking about letting foreigners into the country who are doing this. And the second thing he says, that not all these criminals entered during the Biden administration because they've made a count, but they haven't dated the count. And that means that some of these people could go further back. But he says this, however, he says, this non-detained docket has more than doubled under the Biden administration, from 3.2 million at the end of fiscal year 2020 to over 7.3 million now. And he says the data shows there are tens of thousands of illegal aliens convicted of homicide, rapes, and other violent felonies currently roaming in the U.S. So that's not opened it out. And so with these caveats in mind, I don't think it really changes the picture all that much. Maybe it shows that the responsibility is a little bigger than just Biden-Harris. But nevertheless, this country has been taking in the undesirable of the undesirable.
Well, let me ask you a question. Okay, so on these caveats that you mentioned about them having a visa, first of all, if you're a murderer or a convicted murderer or a rapist, do you just suddenly become that, or were you that in your home country? And if so, how in the world are you not vetted?
Because I just think the United States has very poor data. Just think about a country like Mexico. Some guy is convicted in rural Mexico of a rape. Do you think that the U.S. government has an ability to know that that guy did that, let's just say 7 years ago, in some village in Mexico? Probably not. And so the point here is, and I'm actually agreeing with you, we have to be, instead of saying we know all this information. I mean, think about, for example, all those Afghans that were led into the country. People who, by the way, they were not allies of the U.S. They just rushed the planes, they got on, and they were transported here. We don't know anything about those people. What tribes do they come from? And how many people have they? The Somalians, the same thing.
Same thing.
We have imported a number of people here. Now, what's interesting is we were with your cousin from Venezuela, and he had an interesting take on all this. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So he goes, Debbie, because he knows I've been talking about Tren de Aragua, which is the very violent prison gang that it has now made its way to America, and they're wreaking havoc everywhere they go. And now there's all these gang wars because, of course, the American gangs are mad that the Venezuelan gangs are taking over their territory and all this stuff. And he goes,
when I was on Tim Pool show, we were talking about this, the gang wars in Chicago, and we were trying to put bets on these gangs because the Chicago gangs are noticeably vicious. And Tren de Aragua, those guys are unbelievably vicious. And because foreign criminals are, in a way, you get a level of degradation that is hard to believe for Americans. In fact, even with the cartels, when you see, a head hanging from an overpass, the Americans are like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Whereas Mexicans are like, this is what these gangs do.
Daily.
Right.
Yep.
And they do it not just because they're vicious, but they do it to send a message. And so because we're not used to going by an overpass and seeing a dangling head, this is not something that we want here in America.
That's a very, Hamas / Hezbollah kind of thing to do,
yes,
right?
It is.
Also.
Yeah.
But so my cousin was saying, yes, it's bad. There's probably about 1,000 or more of these people in America. He goes, but you know what you really need to worry about more than even the criminals? It's the illegals, the families that came in and expect handouts and expect to change the culture of America. Because
they're not even coming with any great cultural project. They're just coming because they're a certain type of person who's been told on the street of Mexico, or as you say, on the street of Venezuela, there's going to be a house waiting for you, and you're going to get this and you're going to get that, and they go, oh, I'm in, right?
I'm in.
And people who have had hard lives, so in a way you don't even blame them, because if you were them, you would go, wow, this is awesome. This is like the gold rush of the old days, right? In the 19th century, there's gold in California. All these Okies from Oklahoma decided, come on, Martha, let's pack up the wagon and head out to California because there's gold to be found if you just put your hand in the ground and dig, right? Same thing is going on here. So in some ways, the fault lies with Biden and Harris. They are the cunning instigators of this whole thing. This is not a case where I'm actually even blaming the illegals. I mean, do you agree?
I completely agree. Word on the street was that Biden wants you to come over to America and you're going to have a better life than you do in Venezuela. I mean, think about it. The people in Venezuela that were middle class are now begging in the streets. They're dirt poor. Why wouldn't they want to come to a country where they get like treated, with all these handouts, and like they get a mortgage, they get money.
All you have to do, you could go to any favela in Brazil or slum in India and just go, free food is happening over there, and thousands of people will run.
Flock over.
Of course. So that's understandable. The people who are really selling this country out are the people running this country right now. That's the sad truth of the matter. Before you make a purchase from Balance of Nature, hold off, because I have some information you need to hear. If you go to balanceofnature.com to buy their popular fruit and veggie supplements, that's this, fruits and veggies in a capsule, a discount offer will pop up. It may be 20 or 25% off your first order, but do not click that. Why? Because if you use my promo code, you'll get 35% off your first order plus free shipping. And here's that code. It's America. Use the code and save big. Now, here's another bonus. Balance of Nature has a risk-free money-back guarantee. So you can go ahead, find out for yourself what I already know. There's no other product out there like Balance of Nature when it comes to fruit and veggie supplements. Whether you order online or call direct, you got to use promo code America to get the special offer of 35% off and free shipping. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you'll get 35% off and free shipping. Debbie and I have been talking about the border, and before we let that topic go to talk about something else, you brought to my attention this article in AP. And it's very telling because you can kind of see what AP is up to. The theme of the article is that all these politicians, from Harris to Trump, are talking about the border. But the AP reporter goes, here we are at the border, and it's all surprisingly calm.
All quiet on the Western Front.
All quiet on the border front. Here, I'll give you a few sentences to get the on the riverbanks of Ciudad Juarez, there are no migrants in sight, but evidence of previous crossings still litters the ground. And similarly, they find a spot on the border where they say the Border Patrol's been here for a few hours. They haven't seen a single illegal. It's almost like these journalists sit down and they go, well, how do we undermine the notion that the border is a big deal? They know it's a big deal. They're like, let's go over there to that spot in the border where things are kind of deserted. Let's spend a few hours there. This is assuming that they even have enough respect for the facts to even do that, right? They might just make the whole thing up. But let's just say that they're being, quote, journalists. They deliberately head out to a spot. It's kind of like saying, I'm trying to prove to you that crime isn't really going on. So I'll find the safest spot in, let's say, Texas. I'll sit there for a few hours. I'll go, you know what? I didn't see a single burglary. I didn't see a single robbery. I didn't see in fact, all I see is some litter that might have been left by some miscreants from last week. This is the manufacturing of news, and AP is as good as at it. They are the masters of propaganda.
They're saying that this is all political rhetoric,
right?
Political rhetoric. But anyway, just back to Ciudad Juarez. Ciudad means city, right? City, yeah, not Ciudad, but Ciudad.
Yeah,
yeah. I had sorry.
No. Yeah, I'm glad you correct
me. The Spanish in me. I'm sorry.
Oh, of course, of course. All right. So I think we've covered the board at least for now. We want to talk about something else that, well, actually, you are in a very interesting, I won't call it an Instagram battle, because it's actually a kind of a healthy discussion and dialogue, which you rarely do. But on Instagram, there's a prominent pro-life influencer. So talk about him. We've actually invited him to come on the podcast. Has he agreed to do it?
Yeah, he's agreed. Okay, he's going to come on next week.
Oh, okay. So say who he is and talk about what this is all about.
So he's called the pro-life Spider-Man.
Why does he have that weird name?
Apparently he climbs skyscrapers for women's reproductive health, like, to help pregnancy centers and things like that. And a staunch pro-life activist, and he's got quite a big following. Maison, I forget his last name, but anyway, first name is Maison or Mason. Anyway, he's coming on next week to chat about this.
So he made a post, and that's really what got you flustered and got you to reply and get into kind of a back and forth.
His post is why I'm not voting for Donald Trump.
Right.
And I was like, what? Here he is, a pro-lifer that is not voting for Donald Trump.
With a big following.
With a huge following, 500,000 people on Instagram, probably more on other platforms. But it really got me thinking about, if he's doing this, there's bound to be a lot of people that are the same mindset. And, in a race that is pretty tight and pretty close, we can't afford to lose people because of this, right? And so I kind of...
And on the... it would be one thing if a pro-lifer were to say, hey, I am so disappointed in the Republican Party because going back to Reagan, I've heard promises to end Roe versus Wade, and no one has delivered a thing. In fact, for people like George W. Bush, who supposedly was all on board and a devout Christian, even for him to mention the issue in his State of the Union address was regarded as a victory, for the pro-life movement. And let alone for him to show up at the anniversary of Roe. But it's almost as if we were reconciled to Roe. And then Trump comes along, changes the composition of the court, Roe versus Wade is overturned, and the pro-lifers, or some pro-lifers, including this guy, are like, I'm not going to vote for Trump. Now, this requires explanation. So how do you understand what he is saying, and then what did you say to him?
Well, I think what he's saying is that there are some legislation going on in some states that will allow women to have abortions until they have the baby. Right? And so I guess what he's saying is that he's not satisfied that Trump is okay with states deciding this issue, this very issue,
Trump
right?
Is, no. I think what he's saying is this. What he's saying is he's blaming Trump for the fact that the decision is now in the states.
Right, that's what I mean, yeah.
Trump himself had initially made a comment. I think actually out of ignorance. Trump had said something about Florida was talking about getting rid of its 15-week heartbeat law. And Trump himself had said, well, maybe it needs to be longer than 15 weeks, something like that, suggesting that Trump might vote himself in Florida, because he's a citizen of Florida, to extend the term. Now, the Democrats want to extend the term to 9 months, but then Trump quickly changed and retreated on that and said, no, I'm not voting for this, because Trump realized that we're not talking about going from 15 weeks to 20. We're talking about going from 15 weeks to 9 months. So, but look, the pro-lifers were a little freaked out by this, number one. And I think what he's saying is that the Republican Party, led by Trump, is not advancing, but is retreating on this issue. And there may be some truth to that in the sense that, by and large, when Roe versus Wade was still intact, it was easy for Republicans, even in swing states, to go, I'm pro-life. Because think about it, if you're running from dog catcher to sheriff, I'm pro-life, was a way of conveying I'm solid on the moral issues, but it never came up. You never had to vote. Never was your position jeopardized by you being pro-life. Now the states are making those decisions. Well, what did you say to this guy to change his mind?
Well, I'm not sure I did change his mind.
No, but you had a very, you should even read. Your statement is so eloquent.
Yeah,
and you read it to me, and I was like, that you did a great job.
let me
I think you should pull it up and read your statement, because your statement makes the case very well, whether it convinced him or not.
I don't know. So it says, at the end of the day, it's obviously your decision who you vote for, right? And I feel that way with everyone.
Yeah.
But as someone who knows the evil of socialism, I'm just not prepared to sit back and watch this country go up in flames. And trust me, it will go up in flames if Kamala wins. The problem is that we both know that abortion at any time of gestation is murder. I know it. He knows it. Most Christians know it. I agree on that. But the majority of Americans, unfortunately, don't think that. They think it's health care. They think it's women's care, women's right to choose. We just haven't effectively made the case for life. And our pastors have failed the parishioners by never wanting to talk about this issue from the pulpit. And the truth is, in all actuality, had it not been for Trump's SCOTUS appointments, we would still have Roe v. Wade. We would. And the pro-life cause would be decades behind. We wouldn't even be having this argument, right? So as with the abolitionist of Lincoln's time, there is a time to allow the cards to fall so that real change can happen. God's got this, but our free will and stubbornness may cause us to regret our decision of simply allowing Kamala to come in because we're not going to support Trump. And she will overtake this country. And she's not just a pro-choice Democrat. She's a pro-abortion advocate. And she goes further, right? She's okay with the harvesting of babies' organs, et cetera, et cetera. So very evil.
Yeah, keep going.
So, and then he does mention IVF as another issue. And I said IVF is another issue altogether because that's a tough one to convince people that, especially like people that are wanting to have a child and that's the only way that they can do it. So the vast majority of Americans, even Christians, don't look at that under the same light as the other. And then I just said, I appreciate your thoughts on this. And as I said, I hope you are at peace with your decision because it is going to be hell in this country if these people go back to the White House for another term.
I mean, one of the points, we'll discuss this with him on the program. One of the points he makes is that I think he's disappointed at the lack of progress and the fact that it seems like these referenda in the states are not going the pro-life way. I think the key point to make, though, is that is actually, I won't say the fault of the pro-life movement, but it is the responsibility of the pro-life movement to create that consensus.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do things in a democratic society.
Yep.
To put it somewhat differently, wisdom, which is the pro-life principle, has to be vindicated by consent. That's the consent of the governed. That's right there in the Declaration of Independence. We have these rights, but then the other phrase is consent of the governed. And the problem is, and this is the problem of slavery as well, what happens when an immoral right and a constitutional right is not supported by the consent of the governed? That's when you have a problem, so to speak. Now, we live in Texas. The truth of it is, thanks to the overturning of Roe, no abortions are happening in Texas. I mean, the left is a little freaked out about it, but it's a fact. And it's a large state, and the state is functioning normally without abortion. So my point to pro-life Spider-Man or whatever is there has been progress.
There has been.
And there was an opening created by the overturning of Roe, by the Dobbs decision, for a lot more progress to happen. Now, it may happen slowly or fast, depending on how well we do our job. But just to say, hey, listen, we're not having as much progress as I would like, and therefore I'm going to jeopardize all the progress that is happening now by voting for people who will have a national, Texas will have a massive setback because they want to have an abortion law that would make abortion legal for 9 months nationwide.
Everywhere.
And my message to the pro-life Spider-Man, maybe we'll get that anyway, but you don't be an accessory to that.
Amen.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.